Welcome to my channel. As you know, I'm Carolyn Beaumark, and I was doing this little series about grief, my grief. And as you know, everybody's grief is different. Everybody goes through different stages at different times. And I'm just here telling you my story. I have people ask me all the time, you know, what happened? Um, How did you handle it? How are you now? All of these things. And I decided to make a video about it. I split it up in different parts because, like, I'm doing good now, but to talk about it actually brings back, feelings of, just loss and just missing your loved one. But I enjoy making the videos about this, and because my thing is that if it helps just one person, I will be happy. If it helps one person to get through it, get you'll never get over it, but you will get to a point where you realize life has to go on. You have to go on, especially if you're at an age where you have to work every day. You're not at retirement age, so you have to get up, you have to work every day. You have, like I have well, my kids are grown, but they're in their 20s and, they still need help, and you still have to be the strong one. So I left off my last story, Grief Part 3. If you guys want to check parts 1, 2, and 3, so you can kind of catch up to see where I'm going now, feel free to do so. So, the last video, I said that my husband, oxygen level was low. He would not go to the hospital. Well, I begged him to go to the hospital. He wouldn't do it. He said, if I don't feel better, or if it doesn't come up by the time you get off work, then I'll go then. And I said, okay. But if you let my daughters know, or you could just pick up the phone and you call 911 yourself. And so that's what he did. So I'm at work, and by the time I got home, because I kept checking on him throughout the day, by the time I got home, the ambulance was outside of my house. Did my husband call the ambulance? No, he didn't. No, he didn't. My daughter called the ambulance. My husband was a little upset about it that she called the ambulance, but she said throughout the day, she kept knocking on the door and calling his name, Mr. Rudy, are you okay? And throughout the day, he would say, yes, I'm fine. Yes, I'm fine. Well, this particular time, probably like around 5-ish, she knocked on the door, or maybe 6-ish. She knocked on the door, and she said she heard some moaning. And then she could hear him moving around. So she said, well, he's moving around, so he must be okay. And then all of a sudden, she heard a thump, which means that he fell on the floor. She didn't know that he fell on the floor, but that's what happened. He fell on the floor. She tried to go inside of the bedroom door, and he had locked the door. Later, I learned that he locked the door because he said he didn't have on any clothes and he had to go to the bathroom. And so he didn't want to risk her coming in there. Um, so, anyway, my husband had a pacemaker defibrillator. So, if your heart goes into like a rhythm that it's not supposed to go in, it will thump you and it will knock you off your feet. I remember him getting the defibrillator pacemaker, and that's the one thing that they said. They said if it goes off, it is so strong, it will knock you off your feet. And that's what happened. It knocked him off his feet. He fell. So that's the thump that she heard. And so she said, Mr. Rudy, are you okay? He didn't answer. My daughter immediately called 911. And so by the time 911 got, by the time the ambulance got there, my husband came too. They were knocking on the door of the bedroom, and he was like, "Yes, I'm here. I'm here." And they were like, "You have the door locked. Can you, unlock the door?" My husband said that he crawled to the door. He put up something, a robe or whatever, around him. He couldn't put it on, but he put it around him. He crawled to the door. He opened the door. So by the time I made it home, they were bringing him through my hallway. He was coming through the hallway on the stretcher, and he had like an abrasion here. It was pink. And I said, and this was before I knew that he fell. When I saw it, I said, "Sweetie, did you fall?" And he was like, I was like, "Oh my goodness." So, the ambulance said, "Where do you want him to go?" And I said, "We can go to the nearest hospital." Either they suggested the nearest hospital. So that's what we did. My husband was a military guy. He was a veteran, and we do have a veteran hospital, but that was way in Dallas, and we don't live in Dallas. So they took him to the nearest hospital. So at this time, this was like right in the middle of COVID. And so when they took him to the hospital, I couldn't go in. They told me to wait outside. And well, actually, before the ambulance drove off, they said, "Get his medications," because the nurses and everyone would need to know his medicines. And so I ran in the house, got the meds, and I went up to the hospital, but they never let me in. So what they did was the ambulance got my number. Either I don't know if they got it from me or my husband, but anyway, um, they called me while I was outside, and I literally had to go over all of his medications on the phone outside. Did that, and they called, I don't know, a few times, and after that, they said, "We have your number. Your husband has his cell phone." Actually, my husband did not have a cell phone. They told me, "Your husband said to bring his cell phone." So I went home. I got his cell phone, his charger, um, and just a couple of things that he wanted. So I took it and I took it to the hospital. They gave it to him. So that night, I went home and um, I waited for a couple of hours because I know they were doing all types of tests and I didn't want to be calling. So I waited until later. I called. And so we talked on the phone and I told him how much I loved him. And he was telling me how much he loved me. He was short of breath a little bit. He was short of breath. So I didn't keep him a long time. They had oxygen, just regular O2 nasal cannula on him to help him breathe. They had him hooked up to the monitor to make sure that they can keep a close check on his heart. I told the nurses about his pacemaker defibrillator. So that was that. So every day my husband was in the hospital and I would go to work. We would eat lunch together. I would go to my car. I would turn my FaceTime on. I knew that his lunch comes anywhere between 11:30 and 12. So I didn't take my lunch break until then. And we would talk FaceTime and have lunch together by phone. I would be looking at him. It would be silence most of the time because for him to talk and eat was, a little bit of a struggle, just a little bit of a struggle at that time. And so I was doing most of the talking and he would be, just shaking his head or whatever. So that went on for about a week. And every day, the nurse will call every morning. The nurses, whoever went off the shift, that's who will call. They will call, give me an update. His oxygen level is still low, and it's even lower when he gets up to go to the bathroom. So we are encouraging him just to not get up at all because it drops his oxygen level so low. And I said, babe, you need to listen to them. But my husband was adamant about getting up, going to the bathroom. I don't know why, but that was him. I gave his room number and everything to all of his children, his daughters, and let me get some water. And they would have a time that they will call and check up on him as well. They knew that late at night was my time. Lunchtime and late at night would be my time to call him. would be my time to call him. And so we never bumped heads on, as far as who's going to call what. We all had like a certain time that we called. And at that time, they wouldn't allow anyone up to visit. And I really hate that. That's why we communicated by FaceTime. I wanted to see him. He wanted to see me. This one particular day, when things started going even more south, his oxygen level was lower. They asked him, do not get up under any circumstances. My husband had to go to the bathroom. My husband got up. By the time they saw my husband getting up, he was halfway there. They tried to, turn him around, and he wouldn't do it. He went to the bathroom. By the time my husband got back, his oxygen level dropped so low. And when it dropped so low, it would not even come back up. So they put him on this high flow oxygen. So I had called him that night. And when I called him, they had not put the high flow oxygen on him yet. Respiratory therapy was there. And I said, hey, how is he doing? Because my husband didn't tell me anything. Hey, how is he doing? And they said his oxygen dropped so low when he got up that we have tried everything and it will not come back up. So we're going to put him on high flow oxygen. When we put him on the high flow oxygen, I cannot remember. I'm a nurse, but I cannot remember the name of the device. I don't know if it was a BiPAP or something, but it was high flow oxygen. They say once we put him on there, he will not be able to talk on the phone while he has that on. When before we hung up, so she said, make sure you guys go ahead and say goodbye because we're going to be putting this on here in just a minute. We already went and got everything. And I said, sweetheart, I said, it's okay. I said, when we call each other, we'll just look at each other on the phone. And he was like, okay. And I was like, I love you so much. And he was like, I love you too. And like, it took every breath in him to even say that. I love you too. And I said, it's okay. I will call the nurses in the morning and check on you. He was like, hung up. I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning. I was off work. I woke up and I called the nurse's station because I knew I couldn't, call him. I could, but I didn't want to bother him. So I called the nurse's station, talked to the nurse, and she said, yes, after they put the high flow oxygen on, then around like 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, the high flow oxygen never brought his oxygen level up to where it needed to be. And so the next step will have to be the ventilator. We talked to him about it. He's in his right mind. And he signed the paperwork himself. We talked to him about it. And He signed the paperwork and he said yes, he wanted to be on a ventilator. My husband has always told me that if anything ever happened to me and I have to be on a ventilator, put me on a ventilator until they say, you know, he can't be on the ventilator anymore. So I was gonna, even if he could not sign the papers or agree to being on a ventilator, I would have done it because he told me that. My husband and I had like we talked about everything before he was put on the high flow oxygen. Everything. Anyway, my husband was on a ventilator. So the only way we could see my husband is through the computer Teams. So the nurse will set the computer up and put it on Teams, I think it was. And it was like a conference thing. So it was me and all of and most of his kids. And we would just see him there on a ventilator. We would talk to him. The nurse would be in there changing his position. You know, he was actually on his stomach with his arms like this over the bed and the pillows or whatever to open up his lungs. And so that's the way we talked to him. But one day I called up there. I guess they must have had a new nurse or a travel nurse. And I said, I really wish I could come up to see him. And he said, okay, come on up. I think it's okay. I already knew it wasn't okay, but I went. I went and I stood outside my husband's door. It was like a glass room because this was ICU, the COVID unit. It was glass. And so I just stood outside of the glass and I just looked at my husband. I was there for maybe, I mean, the nurse even went and got a chair for me, and I just sat there. I sat there for at least 20 minutes before another nurse came up and asked the nurse, did you tell her she can come up? And he was like, yeah. And they went to the side. And so he said, I am so sorry, but I thought it was okay for you to come up and visit, but it's not. And then he said, I'll give you a few more minutes and then you're going to have to leave. And I said, okay. So I probably stayed another 10 minutes and then I left. And, you know, I was very, very appreciative. My husband was on a ventilator for about a week, maybe a week and a half. His kidneys had failed. Um, so they did dialysis on him, I think once or twice. And then, you know, one day they did an EEG and there was no, you know, brain activity. So he was gone. You know, you could not have told me in a million years that my husband, whom I had just married less than a year ago, was going to pass away. But nobody knew that this pandemic was going to happen. Nobody knew that. There were, it was so scary because every day you would just hear all the hundreds of thousands of people that have passed away. But I was so hurt. I was so, I don't know, I was just so, my blood pressure was high. I was so anxious. I was just feeling like I was just going to pass out every day. Because then after, you know, your loved one pass away, especially if it's your spouse or your kid, there are things that you have to do. There are people you need to tell. And you're constantly talking about it, talking about it, talking about it. It had gotten so much that every time it would be so much until I would just start feeling faint. Because my blood pressure would be high, my pulse rate would be high, and anxiety, which I never knew I even had. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever had anxiety. But at this time, I did. Um, but sit on my bed here. But, that's just the way it was. And having family, having friends around you all the time is what helped me. And me going back to work, I was off, oh gosh, I was off work for so long. Like I had COVID, so I was off work already for almost a month because I was sick. Then when I went back to work and my husband passed away, I was back off work again for a month. I have never been off work for so long. But you know what? When I went back to work, that is that helped me. That helped me. It kept my mind occupied. It kept me busy. It got me out of the house because I was just in the house. Well, I had to be in the house anyway because it's COVID, but to not even want to go out of the house. I didn't even want to go to the store. I would send somebody else to the store. And it took me about, it took me about, I don't know, a year to say, to be considered, in my opinion, okay, I can do this. It was a slow process. I guess because I was a newlywed, we had fun all the time. We would go places, do things, just enjoy life. My husband enjoyed life. He loved, my husband enjoyed life. He loved his children. He loved his grandchildren. We didn't have kids together, but he loved my kids. It was just, it was just nice. And to go from being with someone every day, you're going everywhere together, having dinner together. He's cooking for you, you're cooking for him, and all of a sudden it's gone. That's something hard that you have to get over. And I was gonna make this segment into two, but I'm not because I just want to end it and not talk about it and just be done with it. And then I had to make funeral arrangements, and at that time, it was so hard to make funeral arrangements. They were backed up. I've never heard of such a thing. Funeral homes backed up. You got to get in line. There are so many people who have died. You have to get in line. Yeah, yeah. So everything was a slow process because it was COVID. But now, I'm living life the way I was living it before I met my husband. Just trying to enjoy life, trying to get out of the house sometimes. As you can see right now, I'm in my favorite place. I'm at WinStar, the same place that me and my husband would go just to get away and to relax. I still do it. I meet friends here. And sometimes I bring my family, like my son, my daughters. I do that. And life is good. Life goes on. There's not a day that goes by that something doesn't remind me of my husband. I think about him all the time. And I guess that will go on forever. And I'm not sure if I would ever get married again. I'm not going to say I would never, but if I found the right guy, I would. So, anyway, I would like to thank you guys for listening to me. And like I said, I hope it helps somebody COVID is not the way it used to be. Now they're looking at it more like almost like having a common cold. It's not as detrimental. You get your COVID boosters, you get your flu shot, and all of these things. I am fully, you know, boosted up, as if you want to call it that. But anyway, you guys, thank you. And I guess I will see you again when I'm just doing a regular video. But anyway, you guys have a nice night. Thank you.